We're sorry to all be a little disorganized here. I had a lot of things to do this morning, and we just finished the gold medal ceremony for President Perez, which took a long time. It was really a wonderful ceremony. I think it's important to quote comedian Leslie Nielsen. It portrays what's going on in the Republican-dominated House of Representatives better than anything that I could ever think of or study to figure out something better. This is it. Here's what he said. Doing nothing is hard to do. You never know when you're finished. Well, certainly that's what's going on in the House of Representatives, because they have done nothing like the Republican, Tea Party-directed Republicans we have in the Senate. It's been 365 days, 52 weeks since we passed in the Senate a bipartisan comprehensive immigration reform bill. That common sense immigration bill would create jobs, reduce our debt by $1 trillion, and keep families from being torn apart. In a true bipartisan way, 8 senators, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, sat down and hammered out what they thought was the solution. Went to the committee, it went to the floor, and we passed it. Senator Leahy managed that bill for the entire Senate, those 8. Americans want their elected officials to work together to fix our nation's problems, and this is a problem that needs to be fixed. 8 in 10 Americans support immigration reform. That, to me, is about 80%. And polls have shown that even a majority of Republicans support a bill with a pathway to citizenship. Even this, President Tom Donahue went so far as to say, head of the Chamber of Commerce, Republicans shouldn't bother to run a candidate in 2016 if they don't pass immigration reform. And he said it more than once. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. He really believes that. This Republican-oriented, directed organization led by Tom Donahue believe this. And I think they're right. The House has had a long time to act. They now have a month to act. New Majority Leader McCarthy has a clear choice to make. He can get to work and force a vote on immigration. It wouldn't be very hard to do because it would pass by a wide majority. I've said that a majority of Republicans would vote for it. And of course, the Democrats would vote for it overwhelmingly. Now, if something is not done by the Republican-dominated House of Representatives during the month of July, the sole blame without any condition or suggestion of minimization would be that the Republicans are the reason that we have been unable to do immigration reform. Each day they don't act. Each day they are killing it. Each day that the House doesn't act, we don't make progress toward closing the deficit, creating jobs. Other countries become more competitive economically. We lose talent, and more families suffer. So instead of wasting time suing the president, the House should do the work of the nation and pass comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you very much, Leader Reid, for your strong statement, for your great leadership. 1 year ago, as you mentioned, 1 year ago this week, the Senate passed a strong bipartisan immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform piece of legislation. For 1 year, we have been waiting, urging, cooperating with the Republicans in the House to bring a bill to the floor. They didn't want to bring the Senate bill to the floor. We suggested a compromise bill, H.R. 15. Many of the co-sponsors are here now. They rejected that. We said, just do it any way you want, but bring a bill to the floor. Give us a vote. People across America, the religious community have traveled the countries, had starvation, fast, all the rest, to make the point how important this is. The law enforcement community, that was the Bibles. The badges, the law enforcement committee have come here and testified over and over again how important this is. The business community, as Senator Leader Reid has said, support this legislation. You can make a business case for it. If you have agriculture in your state, if you have technology, if you have hospitality, the list goes on and on. Why this is needed for the economy of our country. It will, as the senator said, reduce the deficit by about $1 trillion over the next 10 years, a couple $100 billion in the near term. It's about our values that, as a country, that we want people who are here to have rights and have a path to legalization and citizenship. It's about a sense of decency toward other human beings, as President Bush has spoken of, President George W. Bush, who was a leader on immigration, when he said, when we have this debate, we should do so with respect for the people that we are talking about. So whether it's about the constant reinvigoration of America that the immigration community is, whether it's about our values of respecting people, whether it's about our economy and the need for us to have comprehensive immigration. There's so many reasons why. Today, on this one-year anniversary, we say to the Speaker, give us a sign, give us a vote. If we don't have some indication in the month of July that there will be a hearing or there will be a bill scheduled for the floor, it seems that there's little chance for us to pass such a bill. I'm hopeful. I believe the Speaker is of good faith on this. The Senate has acted. Long overdue for the House to do so. We have many senators and members who are here, but because we have votes on the floor, I'm going to yield to the Democratic. We'll go to Dick Durbin, a champion on immigration reform, the leader of the fight for the Dreamers in the Congress and comprehensive immigration reform.
Dick will be brief and I'll be brief.
Thank you very much. When I heard yesterday that Speaker Boehner was going to sue the President of the United States for using his executive authority, it recalled a moment in history in one of the darkest moments of the Civil War when another president from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln sent a message to General George McClellan, who was refusing to use his army to execute the war and win. His message was simple. If General McClellan isn't going to use his army, I'd like to borrow it for a time, Lincoln said. That's what we face when it comes to this issue of immigration. That Speaker Boehner, who has refused to call this bipartisan measure that came out of the Senate now for one solid year, is critical of this president for using his authority to try to address the many challenges of immigration facing our nation, recalls that moment in history in my mind. We passed a bill after a lot of long, hard efforts and negotiation. It was a bill that had the support of business, of labor, of the faith community, all across the United States. It is a bill that really appeals to all of America because it solves an American challenge that still continues to this day. Despite his majority in the House of Representatives, Speaker Boehner refuses to call this bipartisan measure because he knows quite simply it would pass. And if it passes, it would begin to solve the problems of our broken immigration system. A year has gone by. I don't know how much more time he thinks he needs. But I hope that Speaker Boehner will speak up today, and if he does not, the President will borrow the power that is needed to solve the problems of immigration, and he shouldn't be sued as a result of it.
I'm pleased to follow my friend, Dick Durbin. Leader Reid just told you that we came from a ceremony giving the gold medal to Shimon Peres. Shimon Peres, in many ways, a founding father of his country, a country which for millennia was peopled by the Jewish people, but in another sense, a nation of immigrants, as America is a nation of immigrants, made great and courageous and entrepreneurial by its immigrants. We have a new majority leader. I was once the majority leader that had the power to put a bill on the floor or keep it off the floor. Mr. McCarthy and I talked yesterday, and I asked him to consider bringing this bill to the floor. I urge Speaker Boehner to bring this bill to the floor. America deserves the right to have its representatives vote on this critically important issue to our country, from an economic sense and from a moral sense. We demand, we plead, we ask, on behalf of the overwhelming majority of the American people, bring this comprehensive immigration bill to the floor, and do it now.
Well, thank you, and I want to thank all of my colleagues for their hard work. We're here today, as everyone knows, because a year ago tomorrow, Democrats and Republicans came together in just the way people want us to act, in a bipartisan way on a major issue where everyone compromised, and we addressed our broken immigration system. The bill we wrote was not perfect, and it's not everything that any one person wanted, but it was a good, reasonable compromise that strengthens the border, offers tough but fair path to citizenship, reduces the deficit, and boosts our economy. It got broad support across the political spectrum, from the most liberal to the most conservative. And yet still the House can't summon the courage to bring a bill to the floor. The House has yet to act. Hope springs eternal, because Republicans know that if the House does not pass immigration reform, they'll be handing the House, the presidency, the Senate to Democrats in 2016, and we will write our own bill in 2017, and it'll be a bill less to their liking. The leaders of the House know that they're coming up to the edge of a demographic cliff, and immigration reform is the only thing that can keep them from falling off of it. A majority of their caucus knows it as well. An informal whip count before Cantor was lost indicated a majority of them said, let's move a bill forward, even if they don't want to vote for it. So they know. They all know. But it's a small sliver of a minority of America, which has disproportionate weight, the Tea Party, that prevents them from moving forward. They're afraid of the Tea Party. They're afraid of the word amnesty, even though our bill is not amnesty at all. But Rush Limbaugh says it enough, and they're afraid that their primary voters, who skew far right, believe it. A majority of the Republicans in the House, so, therefore, are in the pray yes, vote no caucus, because they want to deal with the issue for the good of their party, but they're afraid of the Tea Party and the almost hateful anti-immigrant forces led by Stephen King. The Tea Party may be a sliver of the American public, but they make a huge percentage of primary voters in their district. So the question before House Republicans is this: will you let Steve King be your spokesperson? Dictate to what your party does on immigration, which is nothing, for the next year and a half? That's what you're doing. That's exactly what the Republicans are doing. Or do you summon a little bit of courage and pass immigration reform that'll be good for you, your country, and your party? I'd encourage my friends in the House to look around and realize that the Tea Party, while still very powerful, has peaked. And in only one major election did they cause the demise of an incumbent, and that is Eric Cantor. If you look at the Lindsey Graham election, if you look at the Mitch McConnell election, if you look at the election in Oklahoma, Renee Elmers in a conservative district campaigned on immigration reform and won. Their fear is greater than the reality, but they're quaking in their boots, and America suffers. I'm still hopeful. Maybe they'll come to their senses, because people usually at the end of the day do what's in their self-interest. And it is clearly in the self-interest of the Republican Party to move forward, and Speaker Boehner knows it. But they have about a month. They have about a month to summon the courage to do what's right for their party and what's right for their country, to break the chains of bondage that the Tea Party has wrapped around them, which will consign them to minority status for a generation. Let's hope, for the good of the country, they summon that courage.
Thank you, Majority Leader Reid, Leader Pelosi, and all my colleagues and senators who have spoken before me. There's no question that my colleagues have all laid out many reasons why we need this CIR, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Bill. Most notably, that comprehensive immigration reform will reunite families and strengthen our economy. It's of great importance to our country. That's why you heard the 80% of people who are polled saying that they want it to be passed in this 113th Congress. As chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I can tell you that it has been our signature issue, and we've been fighting fearlessly and always in support of getting it done this year. The will of the American people, by that 80%, are telling us to act, yet Republicans continue to hold immigration reform hostage. The U.S. Senate has done their job. It's critical that we in the House of Representatives do our job. The House has a bipartisan solution before them in House Bill Resolution number 15, which was introduced by my CHC colleague, Congressman Joe Garcia from Florida. It has been said many times, but I will say it once again. Now is the time to pass comprehensive immigration reform by this 113th Congress. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to join my colleagues on both sides of the Capitol here, because we're at the end of the line. It looks as though the Republicans may be giving up on our last chance to bring 11 million people out of the shadows, our last chance to make sure that there are no second-class citizens in America, the last chance to do what is right for America, for the economy, and for the future of our country, and the last chance for the Republicans to be on the right side of history. The political consequences of their inaction and obstructionism are now forthcoming. Today, 1 year later, after hundreds of rallies, thousands of advocacy meetings, hundreds of thousands of families being torn apart, immigration reform sits languishing in the House of Representatives, and the country waits. 11 million people wait, and the toll from Republican inaction compounds. Families suffer, children suffer, deportations continue, and injustice prevails. I hope our Republican colleagues in the House remember their immigrant heritage. I hope they understand exactly what the cost of inaction is and what it will mean to stand on the wrong side of history just to score political points for a handful of the most conservative districts in the country. I hope they understand that we're not bluffing by setting a legislative deadline for them to act. By killing immigration reform, they're turning their backs on their own immigrant heritage, on the agriculture community, on the business community, law enforcement, the religious community, very broadly represented, on the high-tech community in Silicon Valley, and most importantly, on their own base who have begged to fix our nation's broken immigration system. They're simply on the wrong side of common sense and political realism. And the worst of it is, because of Republican inaction, even those of us who are U.S. citizens sometimes are detained in raids based on the color of their skin. Hundreds of thousands have been deported despite having U.S. citizen children. They are not criminals. They are hardworking families trying to make ends meet. So I say to Speaker Boehner, history says, act now. The clock is ticking, and the fallout for Republican obstructionism will, at the end of the day, take years to recover at the ballot box. The fact remains, if we had a vote in the House of Representatives, this bill would pass. So I'd remind the Speaker and the new Majority Leader that their first job is to govern. And in the absence of governing, then you see executive actions. If he believes at all that the business of government is people, if he believes that responsibility of leadership is that he should move the history to action and stand with us on the right side of history, then I think he will be rewarded. People are suffering. 11 million are living in the shadows. Families are being separated. The clock is ticking, and history is not on your side, but the lives of millions are in your hands. Simplemente quiero decir que ya es pasado tiempo de que la Cámara de Representantes y el liderazgo republicano en la Cámara permite un voto. En una democracia, por lo menos lo que se debe tener es un voto diciendo dónde están las posiciones de los representantes en la Cámara para decir si queremos reforma inmigratoria o no. Pero el no tener un voto, esconderse de un voto, limita la oportunidad de un pueblo saber cuál es la posición del Congreso de los Estados Unidos. Y si no permiten un voto, y si no tienen reforma inmigratoria, los republicanos van a sufrir las consecuencias de una historia donde la van a condenar. Y esa condena va a ser por mucho tiempo. Ellos pueden evitar eso, pueden estar en el lado correcto de la historia, pueden ayudar a millones de personas en este país, a la economía del país, la seguridad de la nación, simplemente en tener un voto en reforma inmigratoria.
Thank you. I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. It's been almost 1 year since 2/3 of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, voted for comprehensive immigration reform. The American people and countless aspiring Americans from around the world have waited long enough. Every day that House Republicans stonewall progress on reform, millions within the Asian American and Pacific Islander community feel the devastating impact. It affects people like the Liang family who came to the United States from China but had to leave their 22-year-old son behind. If Mr. Liang was to petition for his son to come to the U.S., it would take him up to 12 years. Today, more immigrants come from Asia or the Pacific Islands than any other region in the world. Those from Asian countries account for 10% of all undocumented immigrants. APIs make up 40% of the 4.2 million individuals caught in the current family visa backlogs. Some families have had to wait up to 24 years to reunite with their loved ones. Not only that, with the employment backlog, 80% of those waiting for the employment visas are from Asia. And that's why I helped to introduce H.R. 15, our bipartisan immigration bill. It has the votes to pass. Mr. Speaker, the American people don't want any more excuses. It's been 364 days since the Senate passed its bill. Bring comprehensive immigration reform legislation up for a vote now.
Let me join with my colleagues from the Senate and all the members who come up from the House to say, once again, congratulations to the Senate, Democrats and Republicans alike, who passed a bipartisan bill to fix our broken immigration system a year ago. A year ago, that means 365 days, every day some 1,000 individuals being separated from this country, from their families, from their loved ones. Every day, Republicans in the House have refused to let us have a vote. We also see that today, Republicans who have been talking about giving us a chance to have a vote soon on immigration reform are now talking just the opposite. We now know that there's a letter that's going to the president telling him he should eliminate the Deferred Action Program for many of these immigrant young Americans who know no other place as home other than America. More than 500,000 of these young people, many of them at some of our best universities and colleges, some working, many of them already starting businesses, being told that they should be deported from this country. That's where we are today. It seems like the Republicans in the House haven't listened to their colleagues, Republican colleagues in the Senate, and it's certainly clear that they're not listening to the American people, Democrats and Republicans, because overwhelming numbers of Democrats and Republicans throughout this country want us to fix this broken immigration system. So we're left with one conclusion. House Republicans have a choice. They can do this the American way, passing a common sense immigration reform, or they can do it the Tea Party way. We hope our House Republicans here choose the American way to do business and fix our broken immigration system. I still have confidence that we get this done because everything proves that you can. Our Senate colleagues have shown that. The American public is behind it. Perhaps the one place we place too much confidence and faith is in the Republican leadership. Because after months of saying they were going to do something, after months of putting out principles, we're beginning to see their true colors. And so let me finally conclude by saying something in Spanish. Yo sigo con la confianza que esto se puede cumplir. Yo tengo fe que este Congreso va a cumplir con reformar este sistema de inmigración que tenemos en este país. Lo creo porque lo veo. Tal vez lo que está sucediendo aquí es que hemos puesto mucha fe y confianza en los republicanos, el liderazgo republicano de la Cámara Baja, creyendo que cuando nos decían que querían cumplir, lo creían ellos. Y tal vez poníamos mucha fe en esos republicanos que dicen que están en favor de una reforma, pero que hacen nada para cumplir. Es tiempo de cumplir, es tiempo de tener un voto. It's time to vote. We deserve a vote. The American people deserve a vote, and we can get this done if we just got a vote in the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, it's time to vote.
Thank you. I'll be brief. It would be hard to overstate how frustrated the people in Colorado are with the way the Congress works or doesn't work. We're a state that's a third Republican, a third Democratic, and a third independent. And it was a great day in when the United States Senate a year ago was able to pass this bill, and I could go home and say to people, we finally did our job. And we did our job in a proper way, working together in a bipartisan way, Republicans and Democrats, 7 to 8 months of bipartisan negotiations, dozens of hearings on the issue, all in public, a month between introduction and committee markup, 37 hours of consideration in the Judiciary Committee, 300 amendments, 212 considered, 100 passed. Thoroughly bipartisan from the very beginning to the very end. We could not have passed the bill in the Senate without our Republican colleagues, brave colleagues, willing to stand up and face the base of their party and say, this is the right thing to do for our country and ultimately the right thing to do for our party in that order. It's been rare to see that kind of leadership in the 5 years that I've been here, and that's the kind of leadership we need to see in this House of Representatives today. And I don't look at the recent elections and take a conclusion that a vote for immigration is terminal. One of the members of the Gang of Eight, Lindsey Graham, running in South Carolina, won with almost 60% of the vote. He had the guts to do what was right. He had the guts to go home and say why he did it, why it was the right thing for his state, just as it's the right thing for my state. So because of the intransigence of some people in the House, a minority of the minority, the border hasn't been made more secure in the last year. The visa system hasn't been made more functional. The ability for people that are here, that are undocumented, to pay taxes and come out of a cash economy hasn't been addressed. My farmers and ranchers in Colorado still risk losing their farms and ranches as a result of their intransigence. So I hope they'll pass the bill. I apologize actually for going longer than I intended to, and I hope we don't miss the vote. Thank you.
They said they're going to hold our vote.
Okay.
Very quick, clearly a year has passed. A year has passed that we could have stopped dividing families. A year has passed that we could have an immigration system that works. A year has passed that we could have collected revenue we didn't collect. A year has passed that we could have invested in our nation's future. Ha pasado un año. Un año ha pasado donde no hemos podido invertir en nuestro país, hemos dividido familia, hemos fracasado en tener un sistema de migración que funcione. And today what we do is we treat the symptom. Right? These children on the border are just part of the symptom of a broken immigration system. What we need to do is fix the immigration system. If we fix the immigration system, we would have the resources to process these children. We would have the system that worked behind it, that those who have their parents in the United States would have a pathway forward. We could have made a difference. We have not. Lo que hemos hecho en este año, un año que pudo haber pasado, es haber tratado el problema, no el síntoma. Hoy lo que vemos en la frontera es un síntoma. Un síntoma que pudiéramos arreglar si hubiéramos pasado la reforma migratoria. So, I mean, there's not much more to add than the men and women that went before me, but the time has come to act. We asked the Speaker to put it to a vote. H.R. 15 has the votes to pass, and we think we can get it done. Thank you for being here. Thank you, John.
We're ready for questions.
Senator Schumer, how much, to what extent do you think the issue of unaccompanied minors has
They've had different.
rhetoric in the House? And you were talking on the possibility of a detention center in the state of New York and the city of Bethpage, I believe.
Okay, Number one, it's had very little effect. They'd had excuse after excuse after excuse. First, it was the border wasn't secure. Then it was the Hastert rule. Then it was the president wouldn't enforce the law. We don't believe this had any effect at all. As for any proposed center in any part of New York, I'd have to look at the details before commenting.
What about this idea that if they can't get immigration reform through the House or won't move it in the next couple of months here, and the president decides to do something by executive order, doesn't that sort of correlate with what Speaker Boehner said, well, this is another abuse of this?
Well, Speaker Boehner has its very good antidote to what he fears. Put a bill on the floor. You know, I mean, he's like shooting his parents and then throwing himself on the mercy of the court as an orphan. Pass a bill, and that won't happen. The president has no choice, and we've made it clear to our Republican colleagues, both publicly and privately. If they don't bring any bill to the floor, the president has no choice on a humanitarian basis and on a policy basis to act where he can on his own. Is it as good as a comprehensive bill? Not even close. But it's better than nothing.
Let me join you.
Bob, yeah, go ahead, wait, let Bob.
Let me answer that question with saying, here's the abuse. The abuse is not giving the American people, by virtue of their representatives in the House of Representatives, an opportunity to cast a vote and declare a position on immigration reform. That's the abuse. And the Speaker, who has the power to allow such a vote to take place or not, has been abusing that power by virtue of not giving the American people a shot. So when in fact the House of Representatives, on a whole host of issues, but this one most importantly to me, fails to at least either put up the Senate bill or put up the House's version of it, then he invites clearly the action of the executive branch to try to do that, which the Congress seems to be incapable of doing. But if I find it abusive that the 13 members from New Jersey who represent 9 million people don't get a chance to cast a vote on behalf of the 9 million people of New Jersey who overwhelmingly want immigration reform, which is also reflected of the overwhelming view of people throughout this country.
Why should the White House wait for another month? Shouldn't the decision on deportation should come before a month? Why wait another month for the White House to decide on deportation?
We've always said the deadline for getting a bill done feasibly is July 31st. We believe that. Are the chances very small? Very small. But is there still some hope? Hope springs eternal. Maybe Speaker Boehner would come to his senses, because everyone agrees a comprehensive bill is a lot better than any action the president would take.
In addition to that, let me just answer. Excuse me, I'll get to you. In addition to that, let me just say, what does Speaker Boehner say? You asked the question, why shouldn't we ask the president to seek deportation relief now? Speaker Boehner goes around saying, well, one of the reasons, or the main reason we can't go ahead and even permit a vote on their own version of what immigration reform would be is because the president we can't trust the president to enforce the law, which means that he wants more people to be deported, more families to be broken up, more of the same ineffective system that we have today. So what we're saying is, let us give them a chance and not give them the fuel to say that the president doesn't enforce the law, because you have a chance to make a law that can be enforceable. That means you have to pass immigration reform. In the absence of that, then, you know, I'm sure there'll be actions.
When we talk about the situation of the unaccompanied minors, the humanitarian crisis, and we talk about the law, enforcing the law, remember, this is a law that was proposed by Dick Armey, Republican, in the House, and signed by George Bush, Republican president. And so we are in the process now of trying to enforce that law. But if the laws are broken, it's always very difficult to make it work the right way. That's why the president is prepared to use whatever authority he has to make the laws work as best possible. We should probably close unless you have some final comments.
I've been raising my hand for a while.
Fine.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
And you know, there's a data out today that more than 72,000 U.S.-born children lost a parent to deportation last year alone. And as we speak, you know, who knows how many more thousands have been deported on a daily basis. A lot of the complaints that you're raising today, you've been raising for a year, and I'm just wondering, what is your strategy, following up on what my colleague said? You know, it's clear Republicans are not going to move on this in July either. So what is your strategy to push it?
So
What are you planning on doing? Because president is not gonna do it either.
Well, it's not a solution to say Republicans aren't going to vote. A year ago, had Republicans in the House permitted us a vote on the Senate bill or on the House version authored by Congressman Garcia, those individuals would not now be in deportation or have been deported if they could prove that they had a reason to stay under the provisions of the new law would have been able to take effect. And so let's recognize that you can't just dismiss the shutdown politics of a do-nothing Republican Congress. If it's not doing anything to fix a broken immigration system, we shouldn't be surprised that we have individuals who we hope in the future won't be being deported, and we should not be surprised that we have several thousand young people trying to get into the U.S. The system is broken, and the longer Republicans continue to shut down an opportunity to vote, we will find these type of results that are crazy, make no sense, are not good for our economy, certainly not good for families.
And look, I think the leader is clear, and you know, we can blame a lot of people. There's one responsible party here: it's the Republicans in the House. The Senate went forward, did a bill. We have a bill. We've put it on the House. We've got 98% of the Democrats signed onto it. Not one single Republican has signed to get it out through the discharge petition. The question is, do they want to get this done or not? And they've had every excuse in the book, from the Hassett rule, which they violated for what they wanted to get passed but couldn't vote for. They then said, well, the calendar didn't allow it. Then they said they needed to meet as a caucus. That lasted 24 hours. Then they said they didn't trust the president. Now they're trying to blame it on children. I mean, it is beneath the dignity of this body. It is beneath the will of the American people. And in the end, they are going to force the president's hand, because in a vacuum, the Constitution is clear. And when they use DACA children as an example of the president acting outside of his legal authority, it is pathetic. These children are American in everything except the fact they weren't born here. And I think it's sad, and I think we have to keep the pressure on. But if he doesn't, if Mr. Boehner doesn't put it on the floor, I believe, and I don't speak for the leader here, but I believe that the president's hand's going to be forced.
We better close. We have a vote.
We have a vote right now.
Between the Democrats and the Hispanic caucus, because
I don't think there is any division between the Democrats and the Hispanic caucus are clear. This is the fault of the leadership of the Republican caucus, that they are unwilling to bring a bill to the floor, period. And what we're going to do after that, when that option of the best solution is not available, we will be forced to then go to whatever is possible.
calling for the president to take action now.
And I understand, and that you're going to grow that spirit in our caucus. There's no doubt of that. I believe the president should act also. But what I believe is, as a member of the legislative branch, my job is to pass laws, because whatever the president does, it is nowhere near as important as getting a legal remedy that fixes the problem, not a Band-Aid. Thank you.